Greetings sailors and welcome back to World of Warships and a game actually from Aetam, my fellow community contributor podcast host. He's in a bit of a failed division here. This wasn't intentional that there would be two tier 7s and a tier 8. But fortunately for them, it's put them in a tier 8 game rather than, say, a tier 10 game, which would have been rather unfortunate. I think the intent was that the tier 8 in the group, the Benson, Viper Sox there, hadn't realised that he was supposed to pick a tier 7 destroyer, and then Aetam probably hit the battle button, also not noticing, and so here we are. Aetam himself is in the Hood, which is actually a pretty decent ship these days. For a long time I really didn't like it in terms of its gun performance particularly. I always acknowledge that it's a very survivable ship, which seems a little ironic considering the real life history of the Hood. It just wasn't really great for dishing out damage, and its gimmick of the defensive is only useful occasionally. And when it is useful, it's quite useful, but it's not as useful as it used to be. It doesn't create that central no-fly AA zone that it did before all the carrier and AA rework. So you'll still shoot down some planes with it, but really not as many as you might have done once upon a time. And also in games like this where there's no carrier, it is completely useless. It doesn't do anything at all, as is the case with the defensive AA on any ship really. So on the enemy team, we know that there's the Farragut ahead, and he does actually have allies with him here, including that Tirpitz and Viper Sox there in Benson. So I think he's feeling reasonably confident here, because although we don't have that many ships spotted yet, it kind of looks like there's more on the southern flank. I mean, that tends to be how this map plays out in domination anyway, so it's not a totally unreasonable assumption to make. And just the fact that we know the tier 8 destroyer that actually can stealth torp is over on the other side, I think is why Aetam is being quite confident here. He's being quite pushy alongside this Tirpitz. Now, as it turns out, there are actually a few ships there. The Sinop and the Nelson both have guns that can overmatch the bow and the stern, of course. But there's nothing with torpedoes for him to worry about. He just has to be careful he doesn't rush too far forwards and give somebody a broadside. You can see there the Devon Provinciens drop, which didn't really manage to hit much of anything. To be fair, that's kind of a tricky thing to hit. And oh well, actually, talking of torpedoes, there is something with torpedoes. The Farragut is lurking just around that corner and has put their torps out against the Tirpitz. It cannot, of course, stealth drop, but the nasty thing about the Farragut and the Nicholas as well, they get quite a few torpedoes, so if you can set up that kind of stealth drop, you can do really quite nicely out of it. And as you can see, they actually did kill the Tirpitz, so although they went down themselves, that's not a bad scalp for a tier 6 destroyer with short range torps. So there's a punch right through the bow. That was rather nasty and knocked out a gun. The Sinop, however, doesn't particularly want to show broadside, and we can see Aetam is now just going for it, trying to beat the reload on this Sinop and hope that he can do sufficient damage. Hell, maybe even knock them out. He does know he's got a better reload than the Sinop. It's just getting forward fast enough to actually maybe even... Oh, there we go. Not only beat the turret traverse, but as it turns out, managed to finish them off entirely with Citadel hits. It was 4 Citadels. Now we've got the Nelson, who's firing AP. That was a nasty smack, but the Nelson's Citadel is far easier to actually get out. And so, if he can just get his guns around and under the turrets, and there we go, he's taken off half that Nelson's health in return, and now his turrets at the rear are almost around, and he just has to do the same. And there's another battleship who has just been obliterated. Now he's lost a lot of health in the process, but he's come out of that having faced down 2 same tier battleships and deleted both of them out of existence quite handily. So all that's left in his immediate vicinity is that Trento. It's another citadel. Isn't the citadel that finishes them off, even, like in words. But yeah, it does manage to get that kill. That's now 3 kills, 130,000 damage, and overall not bad. Very, very not bad indeed. I think he even managed to get an extra heal out of it, because I'm pretty sure he's using Andrew Cunningham here. I'm sure there's a condition you can trigger that gets you an extra heal or something like that. Or is it one of the other commanders? I don't know. Anyway, there's still a fair few things left on the enemy team, but they have rocked this flank completely. And the enemy team hasn't really broken out to the southwest. They have taken that one cap there, but they're now bottled in, and this leaves Aetam with some lovely, lovely crossfire opportunities potentially. So he can definitely still do it more damage here, provided his guns behave themselves. He was actually quite close in for all of that prior engagement, so he didn't have to worry too much about his accuracy at longer range. But he's now getting to the mid-range and the part where the guns don't fare quite as well, but they still perform well enough. They're definitely better feeling than when this ship first came out. It used to be an absolute struggle to get any sort of decent damage amount. I've said this probably many times previously at this point, but you know, my thing for the longest time with the Hood was that I could always get around 60 to 70k damage, but would really struggle to get past that. So it was really, really good at getting up to that kind of reasonably okay average damage for a tier 7 battleship, but you couldn't really get it past beyond that without some fairly extraordinary circumstances. I suppose you could argue there have been some extraordinary circumstances in this particular game. I mean, he managed to not get deleted by anybody as he was doing those sort of risky broadside passes, but because he knew where to aim himself, because he survived, he was then able to just delete straight up almost 2 tier 7 battleships, and he's actually now finished off that Bismarck, although there weren't any nasty broadside smacks going on there. But yeah, one more and he's got a Kraken. He has in fact just got himself a high caliber on this Colorado, and Colorado being a tier 7. I mean, yes, they can once again have a big enough caliber to smack through his own extremities, but he can do the same. So yeah, if he can get this Colorado angling not particularly well, he might be able to do some nice big chunks of damage. Although, right now, this broadside New Orleans is looking like the more tempting target. So I can't really fault him for going for that. Another 2 Citadels, and that's the Kraken, as well as a Confederate. Also finally manages to get that cap assist flag. He's quite close to burning down at this rate. I mean, he's not going to be finished off by this fly, but if another one gets set, he is done for. But no, as it is, he's lucky in that regard. Heel's about to come back anyway, and with the Colorado down, I don't think there's anything else that's going to be bothering with him at this point. Everything else is, well, the only 2 remaining things are these cruisers. They're focused elsewhere right now. And so, although in other circumstances a low health battleship would be a very tempting target, yeah, these 2 cruisers aren't going to last very long at all. This has been a bit of a runaway success, really, and I think that's in no small part due to Aetam just absolutely storming through this flank, just absolutely kicking butt. It helped that he had the Tirpitz with him there that got unfortunately taken out by the Farragut, but you know, if he'd eaten those Farragut torps instead, he probably would not have survived that pass with the Sinop and the Nelson. But as it was, yeah, he rocked that flank. Viper Sox did all right there as well, 1300, but you know, 2300 is a fair ways ahead of 1300 base XP. So Yeah, but I think overall, even if that flank had gone a bit slower, they probably still would have won this game overall. I think Aetam just helped speed things up a bit and absolutely kicked butt in the process. So yeah, it's always nice to see the HUD doing well, and it's certainly easier to do these days, but yeah, there was that right combination of luck and circumstances, and of course skill, knowing where to aim for those citadels, and of course actually being able to get the shells to hit those citadels. Well, that's the luck part, I suppose, but yeah, it was a very, very good result. So hopefully you enjoyed this replay, and if you have, you can do all the usual things down underneath it, and of course, as always, stay tuned for more.